Hey folks, Jim Dufault here with IO HVAC Controls. In today's video segment, I'm going to take you through our 6-zone ESP panel. So what does that mean basically? So this is a ZP6, a 6-zone panel that has integrated ESP technology in it. Again, what does that mean? Electronic static pressure control. So inside the box, along with the panel, will be this static pressure control sensor. And at the end of the day, what does this mean for you? Again, you don't have to install one of these. This is a bypass system. We've eliminated the need for you to have to install a bypass when you're doing zoning for a 6-zone job, a 9-zone, and even up to 12 zones, which is what this panel is capable of doing. And in some cases, you may not even have the room where the air handler is to install all of that ductwork and the damper that goes along with it. So we've eliminated that. So now we still make our traditional 6-zone panel. That again, this is also expandable to 9 and then again out to 12 zones. But with this zone panel, you're going to need a bypass of some sort when you're doing that type of a zoning job. We've eliminated that by including the ESP technology into this. So I'd like to take you through some of the features and the benefits. There are a lot of brand new things. As obviously you can see, there's an LCD screen on this one. So there's some programming that you're going to be able to do on the LCD screen and some configuration that you can do through some of the dip switches that make this panel just very simple to use. Listen, this is as easy as zoning is going to get. So let me take you through some of these features and benefits. So again, no bypass required with this zoning panel. We've embedded that technology into the panel itself. We can do 2 all the way up to 12 zones. So the panel that you see before you right here, that'll do 6. Again, we sell 3-zone expansion packs. That'll allow you to go up to 9 and then again up to 12. So this does have some commercial application to it. Single stage, multi-stage, heat pump, dual fuel systems, the award-winning ESP technology. And the big one right here, there's a 10-year warranty on this panel. So look, we stand behind it 100%. You're going to love this panel, the simplicity and the thoughtfulness, and it's designed to help you get in and get a zoning job started and completed quickly. Now, with this ESP technology, of course, we need dampers that we can power open and power close. So you're going to be wanting to use 3-wire dampers with this panel. I've got a damper right here. We make both round and rectangular in virtually every size that you could think of. We use the best actuator in the industry, a Belimo actuator. This is a 60-second actuator. And again, every shape and size that you could need, for the zoning project that you have. Just let us know what you need and we can put something together for you. Now, taking you through just some of the standard features of this panel that we basically brought over from our traditional zoning 6-zone panel. So again, 6 to 12 zones. It is a universal, what we call a universal panel, because it basically does everything. So, multi-stage heat pump. Now, what this panel will do is it is a 4-heat 2-cool panel. So we've upgraded you there. Dual fuel auto changeover, first call priority is also in this. So there is some additional things. 20-minute timeshare. We've got high and low limit protection, fully adjustable high and low balance points. This is compatible with virtually all thermostats. So we've designed our panel so that, whether you're using Honeywell, Ecobee, White Rogers, Emerson, whatever it happens to be, Brayburn, it basically doesn't matter. So you're able to use virtually everybody's thermostat with our panel. You just want to make sure that, well, obviously, if the equipment is heat pump, that you're using a heat pump compatible thermostat. Now, the ESP control sensor is going to come with the panel itself in the box, so you're good there. Works with both 2 and 3-wire dampers. I'll explain a little bit more about that because, as I said, for the ESP technology to work, obviously we need to be able to power open and power close the dampers. However, with this panel, you can turn that functionality off per zone. So there may be a zone you don't want to bleed static pressure air into. You can shut that off and actually install a 2-wire damper on that zone. Short cycle protection, 60-second purge option. So, and I'll go over a little bit more about those here in a bit when I take you through the panel itself. So that's just kind of the standard features that came along with our traditional 6-zone panel. But here's some of the new things that we've added that make this panel exceptional. So again, we've added the LCD screen, so you're going to be able to do some of the programming with your temperature sensors and things along that, your high and low balance points and high and low limits, things like that. You're going to be able to use the LCD screen to program that. We have a humidification and a dehumidification pass-through. So if there's a humidifier or a dehumidifier and you have a thermostat and sensors that work with that dehumidifier or humidifier, you're going to be able to plug that into the panel, and there'll be a pass-through from the thermostat directly to that piece of equipment for you. We have an optional night stat. So again, if you want to use this in a commercial type application, you're going to be able to do that. The night stat, when you program that, is basically going to, shut down the, well, not really shut down, but render the other thermostats in the zones inoperable during that nighttime, that nighttime setting that's in that night stat. The night stat basically takes over, runs the equipment during the evening when it's in unoccupied mode. So again, a great feature for commercial type applications. If you've got a heat pump that you're running with the panel and you have the ability to get feedback from the heat pump for faults, so if there's a fault or a fault indicator that's coming back from the heat pump, you'll be able to run that through the panel and then back into one of the thermostats, or you could send it through to all of the thermostats. We've made that possible for you. This panel is also available, or not available per se, but it can be used with variable speed fans. We've put a DS and BK input in there, so if you do have a variable speed fan type equipment, this panel will work seamlessly with it. Again, the programmable LCD screen, and then of course we've got configuration with the setup switches, and then we also have a 10-minute upstage function that is on this panel. Let me explain that real quick. So I told you that this is a 4-heat, 2-cool panel. So if you're going to use it with 4-heat, 2-cool equipment, obviously you're thinking, well, I need to use 4-heat, 2-cool type thermostats, and you can. But if you're going to do 6 zones, say 9 zones, that gets pretty expensive when you're putting in 4-heat, 2-cool thermostats in all 9 zones. With the upstage feature in our panel, what we've done is we've allowed the panel to go ahead and upstage the equipment. So what does that mean? It means that you can use a 1-heat, 1-cool thermostat in all 6 of these zones, or all 9, or all 12, and the panel itself will go ahead and upstage the equipment for you. That's kind of a money-saving option. So if you're running into a bid or into a project where money's a little bit of a sensitive issue, not having to put very, very expensive thermostats throughout every single zone, you can go ahead and dial that back. The only thing you'll need to do is obviously make sure, if it is a heat pump type equipment, you want to make sure that even though it's a single stage thermostat, that it is heat pump compatible. So just so you know, that's just one of the great features that we have. So what I want to do is, I've got one of the panels, just like this one, set up on my right, your left. I've applied power to it. Just want to kind of give you a quick top-down view of what the panel looks like, what the LCD looks like, take you through some of the programming and the configuration of it real quick, show you where everything is and some of the other great features that this panel has. So if you don't mind, join me over here. And I know there's just a tremendous amount of information that I'm trying to get over to you, but also try to keep this video as short and concise as I can. But let's start in the upper left-hand corner over here, because basically what you're looking at is this left side of the panel is where all the thermostats are going to wire in. Now the first one in zone 1, or the zone 1 thermostat, there's some additional features here. So it's just like, any one of our other panels. I mean, you've got your hot and your common, you got your Y1 and your Y2 and your W1 and W2. So I mean, there's your 4 stages of heat and 2 stages of cool right there. G for fan, O and B, is your reversing valve. Now you'll see an L. Now this is that fault indicator that I was telling you about. And in the lower right-hand side of the panel, you'll see where you're able to connect your heat pump into that for any type of fault indication. Each one of the thermostat areas where you're going to wire a thermostat will have an L terminal there, so that you can allow one or all the thermostats to indicate any type of fault that the equipment has. And then just below that, we've got the humidity and dehumidification pass-through. So you'd wire your thermostat into there, and again on the other side, when I get down to that side of the panel, you'll see where the inputs go out to the equipment, the actual humidifier or dehumidifier. And then you just wire in zone number 2 thermostat, zone number 3, zone number 4, and so on. This is where your thermostats wire in. And then on the right side over here, obviously I've told you I've got this powered, so I've got power running to the panel so that I can show you the LCD display. And then right here below this is where zone 1 damper, zone 2 and 3 and 4 and so on. So again, you can see a PC, a C, and a PO. That's nothing more than power closed, common, and power open. So you'll run your dampers in here. And then when you get down below that, here is the night stat hookup that I told you about. So again, this is great for commercial type application. If you've got an unoccupied mode that you need to have during the evening, you can have a night stat run the equipment. This little terminal, these terminals right here for your static pressure control sensor that we're going to provide to you in the box. Now, one thing you need to know with that, the static pressure control sensor that we provide, if you do not wire this into the panel, the panel just becomes a standard zone damper panel, or zone panel rather. So what this does is, as soon as the static pressure sensor is wired in, it automatically knows that I've got a static pressure control sensor wired in, therefore I'm going to be using this panel for that type of application. So if you don't wire this in, the static pressure control function of this panel will not work at all. So just so that you know that. And then continuing down, we've got a discharge air sensor where you're going to wire in. And as you can see, I've got a discharge air sensor wired in. And you've probably already seen the 72 degrees on the LCD, so it's registering the temperature inside the room here. We also have a return. This little RA is a return air sensor. So this is going to be great for diagnostics, for delta T calculations, that sort of thing, to see how efficient the equipment is. And so you're looking at what the temperature of the air going out into the home is, and then you're also able to look at the air coming back in through the system. We've got an OT terminal here. That's for your outside temperature sensor. So with a heat pump, you're going to need that so that you can adjust for your high and low balance points. Here's the fault indicator terminals that I was telling you about. These correspond with the L on the thermostat side. So if you do have the ability to wire back through, if there's any faults on your heat pump, it'll tell you. And then down below here, this is where your system, where you're going to wire into the equipment and a few other things. So again, Y1, Y2, reversing valve, again, G for fan. And then now you can see the DS and the BK. So if you do have multi-speed fans or multi-speed fan equipment, you can wire that in here, and then we're able to use that information in the configuration of the panel over here, and I'll show you that in a little bit, because this is a great little feature. So yeah, the DSBK, then of course for second stage heat. Now humidifier here, dehumidifier here, and then your equipment, your hot and common. So very simple, very easy to see, very easy to wire. But now let's just take a look at this brand new feature that we've put on this panel. This is our LCD screen. So again, immediately what you're going to see is it's going to display the temperature of your discharge air. It's going to, then of course if you scroll through, it'll display the return air and your outside temperature sensor. So all you have to do to program this, and it's so simple, you got three little buttons down here. You've got one that's the select switch. This is just going to take you from setting to setting. So I touch it once, it just lights up the display, and then I go from discharge air to return air. So again, I don't have a return air sensor wired into this, so obviously there's no temperature. Touch it again, it takes me to my outdoor temperature sensor. So again, I don't have one wired up, so there's nothing there. Now I come to the limits. So now I can set my high and my low limit. So this is asking for my high limit, and that's going to be the maximum right there. That's your high. And then of course I can just simply adjust this. I can scroll down and up and adjusting the temperature that I want. And then once I have it in there, all I do is I hit the select switch, and it takes me to the next item, which would be the low limit. And again, I adjust up and down to whatever it is that I want it set at. And then all I need to do is hit the select again. That'll take me to balance point. So now, going to the high and the low limits, I just want to touch base on this with you real quick. So what we do with the panel is we're allowing you to adjust the high and the low limits, because what we're wanting to do is, if you should happen to have a situation in the heating and the cooling of the equipment, say for whatever reason, maybe the air filter, because homeowners, typically, they don't change their air filters all that often. So what may happen is you've got an issue where you've got air that the discharge air is just getting hotter and hotter because it's not going anywhere, and the furnace is just heating that air and heating that air. So what's happening is the temperature is going up. We run the risk of overheating the equipment or tripping the limits on the equipment. So what we've done in our panel is we've put the logic in there so that the panel will trip. Rather than the equipment itself tripping on a high limit or a low limit, the panel's going to go ahead and do that. So we allow you to go ahead and set that temperature. So say 160 degrees on the high end. For whatever reason, something's wrong with the equipment, something's going on in the home or the structure, we reach that 160 degrees. What our panel's going to do is it's going to shut the furnace off, and it's going to continue to run the fan to help cool things down. Now, conversely, on the AC side, if you get down to around 40 degrees, you set your low limit at 40. The air starts getting down to that temperature. Now you're running the risk of freezing up your coil. Again, the panel's going to go ahead and trip. It's going to shut the AC off, run the fan, warm things back up, rather than tripping the limits on the equipment. So now going back to the LCD screen here real quick, there's just a few more items. So again, we can do the same thing. Here, let's go back to High balance point. So obviously if you've got a heat pump, you want to be able to set high and low balance point, which is going to work in conjunction with your outside air temperature sensor. So you can adjust that. So adjust your high balance point, then select it again. Now you can adjust your low balance point. And again, this is just for efficiency so that we know when we want the heat pump to work and when we don't, when we want to switch back and forth to the, to the conventional system, or the furnace itself. So to help save money. Now, upstage timer. Now, I kind of touched on this a little bit. This is very simple. This is just a yes or a no. So if you select the yes, what's going to happen is the panel's going to recognize that you want the panel itself to upstage the equipment. That 10-minute stage timer goes into effect, meaning if first stage heat comes on and it's running and the thermostat's not being satisfied, after 10 minutes, the equipment's going to go to stage 2. Again, 10 more minutes. Then to stage 3. So it's going to upstage the equipment for you. You don't have to worry about the thermostat doing that. So again, if you don't want to purchase the a 4 heat or a 3 heat 2 cool thermostat, again you can use a 1 heat 1 cool thermostat and allow the panel itself to go ahead and upstage that equipment for you. So this is just nothing more than a yes or no. If you do select yes, that means that the panel's going to do the upstaging and the stage timer is set at 10 minutes. It's already embedded in there. You can't change it. Now what we get to is we're coming over to the ESP functionality of the panel. So I just want to take a moment just before I get into this just to make sure that you understand how ESP works. So again, what we've done is we've included a static pressure control sensor in the box. Underneath the cover, you're going to see there's a little dial there. So we set this at the factory at 0.35 inches of water column. Now that is, in our tests, that's when we have found that systems begin to get noisy, vents begin to rattle and shake, the ductwork begins to make a lot of noise. However, we don't know exactly what type of zoning job you're going to come into, how big the zones are, how big the project is, so we allow you to adjust this. So this is how it works. So you're going to insert this end of the static pressure sensor into the supply end of the ductwork itself before you get to any of the dampers. And then, of course, you can just mount this to the side of the ductwork itself or the plenum itself. But again, just this piece just gets inserted into the wall of the ductwork, again, before any of the dampers. You're going to wire the panel with the thermostats and the 3-wire dampers, just like you always have, adding in the sensor. So look at it like this. So if I've got all 6 zones wired in, I've got dampers going to all 6 zones, I've got 6 thermostats wired in, ready to go, and all the zones are satisfied. So if all the zones are satisfied, that means all the dampers are open, the fan is running, and we're circulating air through the home or the commercial building. Zone 1 goes ahead and calls. So what happens is that zone damper stays open because now we're trying to direct heat or cooling, whatever it needs, to that thermostat because it's calling. All the other dampers and all the other zones begin to close. Now this is when static pressure begins to go up. With the set point on this, if the static pressure in the system gets to or above the set point that's on this, the panel goes ahead, sends a signal out to the dampers that have closed and tells them to begin to crack open ever so slightly. So what we're doing is we're bleeding that static pressure into the non-calling zones. Now don't worry, this is not going to overheat or overcool those zones. It's not that much air. In fact, if we're doing anything, we're going ahead and we're helping to maintain the set point that's in that zone. Because let's face it, if that zone's not calling, it's in the process of calling. So it's going to eventually call. All we're doing is prolonging that with a little bit of that bled static pressure air that's going in there. And so this does it autonomously. Once it's set, the panel just takes over. And as dampers open and close, because thermostats are calling and being satisfied, as that process continues to go, the static pressure sensor takes care of it. The panel goes ahead, tells the dampers how to open and close. It monitors the static pressure in the system continuously and makes changes as necessary. So now, like I had told you, we can go ahead and we can look at each zone. So if we've got 6 zones here, zone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. We can go through and we can turn on and off that ESP functionality at the zone. So I've got zone 1 highlighted. So simply by touching the the buttons down here below, you can see this little dot over here. That's just turning on. That's on, and that's off. That functionality. And then once you push the select button again, it takes me to zone 2 and allows you to select it there. and then so forth and so on. So I can select what zones I want to bleed a little bit of that static pressure through to whatever zones I want in the system. So if you're out west, out in California, and you've got Title 24 issues or whatever the case may be, you can help designate what zone or zones you want to send that static pressure to bleed that air into whatever portion of the house or structure that you want. So that's a great feature. And then, and then finally, once you've scrolled through all three using the select button, it just takes you back to the beginning. You're done. That portion of the panel is gone ahead and been programmed for you. Now down below, here in the middle of the panel, we have some dip switches. So this is the configuration side of it, and some neat things down here as well. So all you're going to do with these little switches is just, it's either going to be on or off, left or right with the panel, and then it just tells you what they do. So the system, this helps you decide whether you've got a heat pump or whether it's just a conventional heating and cooling system. If it is a heat pump, obviously, whether it's a conventional or dual fuel setup. Your reversing valve for the fan, if you've got gas equipment or electric equipment, you can select there. Ventilation, again, the same thing. You can either select all by zones, so that'll allow you to do that through the thermostat, or just select all zones and it selects it for you. Purge is something that we've put pretty much on all of our zoning panels, and all this means is if it's on, the panel is going to run the fan for 60 seconds after a zone has been satisfied in order to purge the air out of the ductwork. That's it. So, I mean, you've paid good money to heat or cool the air that's in the ductwork. You might as well get every ounce of it into the zone that was calling. So after a zone's been satisfied, say it was heating, the fan's going to run for an additional 60 seconds and purge all that warm air out of the ductwork. We have a timeshare feature, and it's either on or off. And all this means basically is if I've got a zone that is calling for heat and it's been running for 20 minutes and that zone still isn't satisfied, what we're going to do is we're going to allow the panel to, at that point, after 20 minutes, switch over and allow a cooling call to be satisfied. So it doesn't allow one heating call to hog, up the panel. It's going to allow an opposite call to go ahead and get satisfied. And then down here, finally, we've got priority. Now, what that means is cooling or majority. You choose. If you want the priority to be in cooling, meaning if I've got heating and cooling calls coming in, again, this is, and you're going to see this more in commercial type applications, but if you've got both heating and cooling calls coming in at the same time, cooling is going to get the priority. If you select the majority side of this, all that means is it's very democratic, majority rules. So if there's more heating calls than cooling calls, well, then the heating calls get priority over the cooling calls. Just below that, we've got another bank of dip switches. We call this capacity control. Now, again, because the panel will upstage the equipment, what we can do with this is we can decide, whether we want the equipment to upstage depending on how many zones are calling. So it's like saying, I don't want, my heat pump is big enough to be able to satisfy 2 zones easily. I don't want the equipment to upstage unless 3 zones are calling. That's all this is. And then finally down here, going back to the DS and BK terminals, this is for that multi-speed fan or variable speed fans in the equipment. Again, we can control that a little bit by zone. If the fan is in the low speed mode, I don't want it to go ahead and engage, the next speed of the fan until 2 zones are calling or 3 zones are calling. So again, we try to build a little bit of efficiency into this, to allow you a little more flexibility in running the equipment and how zones are satisfied. So that's pretty much it. That kind of takes you through the panel. I know there was a lot there, and I apologize about that, but we just have some great features to the panel itself. Some additional items that really open up the capability of it. But again, extremely thoughtful in design. And again, this is as easy as zoning is going to get. If you'd like more information on our ESP 6-zone panel or our ZP6 ESP, please reach out to us. You can find all the information you need online about this panel, so you can reach out to us there at www.iohvaccontrols.com, or just simply call us at 888-359-0362. I'm Jim Dufault with IOHVAC Controls. Thanks for watching.